we can pivot either outward on one foot, or we can pivot inward on a foot, or we can pivot inward and then outward if we want to change direction in a more significant fashion. How do we do this safely? The first thing we have to do is make sure we don't have our weight on the foot that we're going to pivot with. And when I say weight in a basic sense, I'm talking about our body weight. But in a minute, I'm going to describe more specifically what I'm talking about is root. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. One of my subscribers recently asked me if I could do a video on how to pivot safely. I think that is a great topic to cover because pivoting incorrectly can really be damaging to our knees, our ankles, and our other joints, and also make us prone to falling down and getting other more serious injuries. Pivoting correctly takes some skill and knowledge of movement from the core, and that's what we're going to work on in this video. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of the Walking Code. I want everybody to know that I have released my new online course, Transform Your Walk, Root, Power, and Direction, and that is available on my website, and it's going to be a low-cost subscription model, and it comes along with access to the Tai Chi Code and my previous Walking Code courses. That is really going to be the ecosystem going forward for my full detailed content, which sometimes is a little much for YouTube. So in this video, I'm going to describe some basics of how to pivot correctly, saving the safety of your joints. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the website, and you can check that out after this video if you're interested in a subscription. First, what is pivoting? When I talk about pivoting, what we are talking about is changing the direction of our feet so we can move or face in a different direction from where we're starting. So if I'm facing forward and I want to turn that way, I can't just turn my body this way. If I want to find a stable position, I need to pivot my feet. So now I am squared up to the new position. So we can pivot either outward on one foot, or we can pivot inward on a foot, or we can pivot inward and then outward if we want to change direction in a more significant fashion. How do we do this safely? The first thing we have to do is make sure we don't have our weight on the foot that we're going to pivot with. And when I say weight in a basic sense, I'm talking about our body weight, but in a minute, I'm going to describe more specifically what I'm talking about is root. So if we think about just our center of gravity weight, we can very easily safely pivot without too much core knowledge just by getting our full center of gravity off of one leg. So it is swinging and then turning that foot out slightly. And then now we can shift onto that foot and we're facing in a new direction. So that is the first thing you should practice. Turning out with the foot that's on the side you want to go towards. So if I want to turn to the right, I'm going to shift all of my center of gravity over to the left foot, freeing up the right foot, and then I'm going to turn the torso to the right, and then now I'm facing with my right foot out at about 45 degrees. This is good enough if we're trying to do a 45-degree pivot. So I shift my weight off this leg, turn it 45 degrees, shift weight onto it, and now I am facing in the new direction. And if I want to go around in a circle like that, I can take multiple steps to get around in a full circle. That is a relatively small pivot and doesn't need a lot of core skill. We just have to shift onto one leg, turn the foot out, shift onto it. Now, let's talk about rooting. Rooting is a little bit more specific than weight, because if we understand how to use the core correctly, we can have our center of gravity over a leg without having our root on that leg. Our root is the energetic connection from our core into one or the other legs, not both, because when we're standing and walking properly, we only root one leg. So I can have my center of gravity over my right leg, but I can root my left leg, in which case now I can pivot out safely on the right foot, even though my center of gravity is over that foot because there's no root on it. However, if I have my center of gravity over this leg and I have my root on that leg and I try to pivot, it's going to twist. That foot is nailed down to the ground and I'm just going to be twisting the knee, not twisting the foot out. And so I'm twisting and nothing's happening except I'm torquing my knee until I remove the root and I put the root over to the left, and now my foot pivots out. I'm going to discuss how to control the root in a minute. But at a very basic level, if you want to be safe doing it, the first thing to understand is just remove your root and your center of gravity. Now there's no question about where your root is and you can safely turn out. Before I get into root, let's talk about the inward pivot as well. So we just did the outward pivot in the direction that we're going to face. My right foot turned out 45 degrees this way. If I want to turn 90 degrees, what I can do is an inward pivot of my left foot. I shift my weight over to the right and pivot out on the left, or pivot in with the left foot. I'm turning the left foot inward 45 degrees, and when I do an inward pivot, I'm generally going to place the foot on the ball of the foot, not the heel. And then I'm going to shift the weight all the way back so the center of gravity and the root are off the right, and then now I'm going to turn out. What you'll notice is when I do an outward pivot, I'm generally going to be placing on the heel. When I do an inward pivot, I'm generally going to be placing on the ball. Ball, heel, neutral. Ball, heel, neutral. Ball, heel, neutral. So by doing an inward and outward pivot, I can turn very effectively 90 degrees. And again, I am taking the full center of gravity weight and root off, inward pivot 45 degrees, taking the full center of gravity and root off, pivoting out 45 degrees, totaling up to a 90-degree change in direction. Now let's talk about the root. The root is our lower abdominal muscles drawing a connection from our spine through the pelvis into one leg or the other leg. And creating root is critical to proper posture and walking technique and pivoting. If we think about our lower abdominal muscles, one side or the other, left or right, the lower abs on the left, and practice this, turn back to the left, turn your belly button back to the left, and they also tuck the pelvis on the left. So think about shifting your weight like this. Most of us are familiar with just shifting our weight in this sense. When we shift our weight like that, the belly button is turning toward that leg and we're tucking the pelvis on that leg that we have the root on, and we're freeing up the other leg. So if I want to change the root back to the right, I'm going to turn the belly button to the right, and you can see how that brings the heel of the right foot down to the ground, and at the same time tucks the pelvis, releases the tuck on the left, and now my weight is on the right. So it is center of gravity weight and root, because I can have my center of gravity here, turn the belly button to the left, and tuck the left. Even though my center of gravity is over the right, my root is now on the left leg. So I can actually turn and pivot out on the right foot because the root is on the left. This is something you can't see with the eyes. You have to feel it with your core. My lower abs are turning back to the left, pressing that left heel into the ground and releasing that root from the right, so I'm able to pivot effectively on the right foot because there's no root. If I shift the root back to the right, now I can't do anything on that right foot. So that is how we're controlling root. Before I get into any further detail, what you can practice is turning that belly button towards one leg without lifting the other leg off the ground. So I'm going to turn the belly button to the left, leaving the right foot on the ground. Feel that consistent active rotation towards the left, and then now see if you can turn your right foot out 45 degrees without having lifted it fully off the ground. This is the second level of pivoting. And then we can shift weight, change your root consciously so it's on the left, and then turn the right foot out. And I'm going to do that, shifting the root and pivoting around 45 degrees at a time. And I did that without lifting the full leg off the ground. So I changed the root, and I only changed the center of gravity partially, because the most important part is the root, not the center of gravity. The more skill you have with the core, the more you can have your center of gravity over one foot, the root on the other, and still pivot safely. But that is for another level. And I'm going to cover that over on the website in the Transform Your Walk Root, Power, and Direction course. So if you're interested, you can hop over to the website. The link will be above and in the description section, and I hope to see you soon.